Welcome back, everybody, to MAN 3025. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 6, Managing Small Businesses and Startups. So really, when we're talking about managing small businesses and startups, we're talking about entrepreneurship. Now, interestingly enough, all small business people are entrepreneurs. However, when we talk about entrepreneurs, we usually don't think of small business people. So what's the difference? Well, initially there is none, but really, an entrepreneur is somebody who continues to grow their business or continues to start new businesses. So the difference is that a small business person is an entrepreneur who is satisfied with the business that they have created. As a result, they might not wish to grow it either in size by employee or revenue after a certain point, or they may decide that they are perfectly happy with where they stand with selling and moving on to something else, at which point we can say they are, in fact, continue to be an entrepreneur. All right. So what is an entrepreneur? It's a person who initiates a business venture taking on all of its risks and rewards. This is important because usually an entrepreneur recognizes some kind of an idea, and recognizes the possibility of financial reward. Usually they are looking at financial risk as well, but oftentimes they're idealistic about it. And they're looking forward to profits. And there are several different motivations that push people in this direction. Really, we can break those down to about 5 different kinds of business owners. You have your idealists who work for something new and creative. They feel that they're changing the world. They have their optimizers, which get a lot of personal satisfaction out of being their own business owner. You have people who are hard workers, who are interested in building larger, more profitable businesses. In other words, they enjoy the building process. You have jugglers, people who are high energy and like to do a lot of different things. And taking on new ventures or new risks is one of the things that they like to do. A great example of this is Elon Musk, who seems to open a new company every year. There's an interesting article about the Boring Company, which is a company that he created to create tunnels that high-speed tunnels that people could use to travel around cities in. He's got a test tunnel coming online in California, I believe this week. And lastly, you have sustainers, who people really enjoy balancing work and life by owning their own business, that they feel that this is the best way that they can do that kind of balancing. Internationally speaking, there's a lot of entrepreneurship that has grown over the last 20 years, and that's a truly kind of American export. It's not that entrepreneurship originated in the United States, but we certainly have promoted it to a degree that other countries had not in the past. In fact, in places like Germany, entrepreneurship was seen as something that was too risky to try. It was recommended that people don't do it, as of about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now, they've since changed their tune and push entrepreneurship in schools, but for a long time that was not the case. So really, entrepreneurs are our new poets, our new rock stars here in the United States, and we've kind of exported that kind of enthusiasm for entrepreneurship around the world. Now, today, entrepreneurs and small businesses are made up of significantly different kinds of people than they were 20 years ago. First of all, entrepreneurship is pushed so heavily and small business ownership pushed so heavily that we see a lot of it occurring at all stages of people's lives. We see it right away when they're young. We see them going into industries and then coming out and deciding to do things on their own. We see them retiring and starting new businesses. Actually, it's one of the largest and fastest growing populations are retirees who just put out a shingle. Used to be an accountant for a large firm. Now I just do accounting, do everybody's taxes in my neighborhood. A lot of people who join retirement communities offer their services to the retirement community members, and they're not really doing it for the money so much as they are doing it for something to do, but they still make a profit at it. They're just not worried about making enough profit to support their lives anymore because they're retired. In addition to that, we see a lot of job creation out of entrepreneurs and small businesses, and this is extremely important. Small businesses hire at a much faster rate than large businesses do. So they are a big part of the economic engine of coming out of recessions, for example. And also, because they pop up so quickly, they're a big part of generating more gross national product as we're coming out of recessions as well. So they're extremely important to the economy, but also to larger businesses who rely on them in many ways. For example, the pharmaceutical industry relies on small pharmaceutical labs that are working on single drugs to go through the first of 2 of 3 phases of FDA approval. Usually at that point, if you have some kind of a medication that you're trying to approve, the expenses related to approving it are run into the hundreds of millions, and small companies can't afford that. So larger pharmaceuticals rely on these small companies to do the initial legwork of phase 1 and phase 2 trials, phase 1 being laboratory work, phase 2 being animal work, in order to be able to move to phase 3. And if they like what they see in phase 1 and 2, they will create a licensing agreement with the smaller firm. So the smaller firm gets to use the larger pharmaceutical firm to finish their phase 3 trials, and at the same time, the larger firm then markets the product, and the smaller firm gets a small percentage of that, which can result in quite a bit of money. Now, what we're seeing is that a lot of people who are entrepreneurs tend to be individuals who find it more difficult to work, or for some reason have barriers to work inside of larger corporations or the more established organizations that are in the United States. So immigrants, women, and minorities tend to start businesses more than other individuals, and retired people, as I mentioned before. Racial and ethnic compositions of business owners still is dominated by white individuals, Caucasian individuals, but we're seeing, again, the rates of increasing participation are higher in ethnic groups and in women than they are in white males. Here's a good example of that, which we've seen this is from 2007, so you can imagine what the numbers are now, where we have 28.7% are female-owned businesses, while 51.3% are male-owned businesses. We're seeing those numbers shifting in the direction of female-owned and equally owned by male and female. So what is an entrepreneur? In other words, what are they like? Well, they tend to have very interesting traits about them. Now, this is not necessarily a list of traits, personality traits alone, but these traits are, in fact, also this list is a combination of attitudes and traits. For example, autonomy. They prefer to work by themselves, not by themselves, but they prefer to have control over their situation, prefer to have decision-making control. They're very high energy. That is a personality trait. They have very high need to achieve. That's a form of motivation and also a personality trait. High levels of self-confidence. They believe in themselves and what they do. They have what's known as an internal locus of control. That means that they believe that they change their own destiny through hard work. Whereas people with an external locus of control, who also tend to work very hard, don't believe that they can change their destiny through hard work, but instead believe that they need luck and powerful others to help them ultimately change their destinies. They enjoy the entrepreneurial struggle. That is actually a motivator to see if you can't struggle through, if you can power through and out-hustle other people. This is something that people who are entrepreneurs tend to actually enjoy. They have a high tolerance for ambiguity. That means they don't mind the fact that they don't have all the answers, that they feel that they can find them or create them on their own or create new ways of doing things. And lastly, they have a strong need for power and influence. Personality trait-wise, this falls down to autonomy, locus of control, self-confidence, a need to achieve high levels of energy, which, by the way, is part of measuring extroversion, and an entrepreneurial sacrifice orientation. One of the more interesting aspects of entrepreneurship is this concept of social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship is rather loosely defined as basically entrepreneurship where the focus is not on profits, but instead on changing social ills. Profits are a part of it in order to sustain the organization, but beyond sustaining the organization, the point of the actual organization is, again, to address social ills that are going on in the world. A terrific example of this is microfinancing. Microfinance is one of the great social entrepreneurial inventions and interventions that have occurred around the globe. So let's say you have an individual who wants to borrow $150 from somebody so they can set up an arepa stand in the middle of a favela, which is basically it's these areas around cities in Latin America that are oftentimes composed of people very low on the socioeconomic scale. In other words, they tend to be living in corrugated steel and wood shacks that they built themselves, and these are very densely populated areas. So let's say this person wants to create an arepa stand. So they need to borrow $150 to get the supplies, buy the some of our the small grill in order to make these in small plate grills in order to make what they're doing. Interestingly enough, they tend to also be women. With social entrepreneurship and specifically microfinancing, that $150 is lent to this person with a payment plan, and what they're finding is a better than 90% repayment of these micro loans, and they change people's lives. Now somebody is making money for themselves instead of worrying about government handouts and worrying about charity. Social entrepreneurship is tricky. Ultimately, if it's making money, it really is just entrepreneurship. But if the focus is on changing social ills very specifically, then it can be seen as something that is more of a social entrepreneurship than a pure entrepreneurial venture. Now, there are obviously some tales of caution that go on with social entrepreneurship. For example, one of the ones that I wanted to show you guys was, that's what we're looking for right here. This idea of one laptop per child. One laptop per child came about in 2007 by 2005 by the individual named Negroponte. He was the head of MIT's Media Lab, and he thought that people should be provided laptops who normally would never see a laptop in their life. And he believed that they should be provided for $100. Now, back in 2005, laptops were all north of $1,000. So this was a very, very novel and innovative concept. So he started signing up people to get it done. But unfortunately, the technical hurdles combined with the fact that the enthusiasm around it resulted in entrepreneurial ventures to create cheaper laptops, resulted in a program that in the end had some successes, but also was kind of a cautionary tale. There's a terrific article about this in The Verge called OLPCs, that's one laptop per child. $100 laptop was going to change the world. Then it all went wrong. Now, this is a complex kind of case study, and it's a fascinating article about it, so I highly recommend you check it out on theverge.com. And ultimately, one laptop per child ended up not occurring because within 3 years, the enthusiasm around creating this and the companies that actually helped to create this technology went in and found cheap ways of making cheaper laptops. In other words, sub $500 laptops, to the point where governments began buying those instead of this particular organization's laptops. And that's one of the reasons why it didn't succeed the way they thought it would. All right, let's go back to our lecture here. Third slide. Okay, very good. So launching an entrepreneurial startup is not necessarily something that can be overly complicated, but it does require some thinking. First of all, you have to have an idea. You have to have a product. If you don't have a product, you've got nothing. Oftentimes people push you to write a business plan because the business plan gives you a roadmap for how you plan on succeeding. It helps you to stay on course. It gives you a mission. It shows you where your competition is, all of those things, which we'll talk about in a minute. However, most businesses that are very successful, many businesses that are very successful, not most, but many, get started without a business plan. So don't let the business plan stop you from starting. However, you will eventually, if you haven't done it already, need a business plan. Here at FAU, we actually have a fascinating program called the Business Plan Competition, which just for having a business plan, you don't even need to have a product in circulation, just a business plan. You can win money to help you launch your idea. And if you win the business plan competition, you're given more than just money. You're given space at the tech runway, and you're also given mentorships, which is fantastic. And you get noticed by individuals who are looking for investment opportunities. We also have a business plan boot camp where for 6 weeks, I think it is, 6 or 8 weeks every semester, you can come in one night a week and write a business plan. You don't even need to have an idea. It just teaches you how to write the business plan by coming up with widgets 101 or whatever it might be. We'll continue in a moment.